Hello, greetings everyone. Welcome to Connect Africa. So, where we go beyond headlines and confront the truth behind Africa's global entanglement, and particularly in this time. Now, as you all know, we Pan Africans here also at Connect Africa, we have taken up it as duty and our responsibility of informing you what's happening in the Sahel states. I'm talking about Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, because the mainstream will not do it. And if they do it, they will do it otherwise. You know how skewed media that is. So what makes it special today is the topic we are going to bring you. It's not only for Africans, but also, it goes particularly to the Burkinabes, to the people, and also to, the government, what we think that, they should pay attention. So with that being said, our today's guest is someone who has not only served at the highest level of the UN in humanitarian affairs, but also who dares to speak about what really happens behind the scenes. Now, especially in moments when African nations are, as you see, are rising to control of their destinies. So, Sister Choice, her name is Sister Choice Ofuma Okoro. Welcome, my sister.
Thank you very much, Sister Mahlet. Thank you, Mahlet Ayele. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to be in your presence. Thank you.
All right, then. So just for clarity, I'm going to share, before we start to kick off our question, I would like to share to our view where we are coming from, what inspired today's discussion here at Connect Africa. So I'm going to read that one. Yeah, so you can read it. I'm going to read the first paragraph here. Hear me. Now, the International Monetary Fund, known as IMF, has allocated $32.8 million to Burkina Faso. Now, this happened on June 20. So the IMF announced the allocation of $32.8 million to support the economy of Burkina Faso. Now, this additional funding, according to them, became possible after a positive assessment of the progress of the joint program aimed at combating poverty and increasing the country's resilience to economic and social shocks. Now, we all remember back in time, the president of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore, has criticized the reliance on foreign debts. Now, still we see this approval. We come to that, but in general, Sister Choice, if you can explain to us how this IMF and World Bank, so-called international financial institutions, operate when it comes to Africa, with what baggage they come, because there are people who don't know also how they operate.
The International Monetary Fund was established in 1944 in New Hampshire. The Britain group, Africans were not there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I need to emphasize that there is a pattern, and we all see the pattern. Anything that has international, that has world, that has united, that has a non-NGO, is usually organized against Africa. The International Monetary Fund is a lending mechanism, and it only operates. The only time I know the International Monetary Fund has succeeded has been in Indonesia. It was able to support Indonesia to pay its debts and move on. Mm-hmm. The International Monetary Fund has been operating in Africa in a very direct pattern. It tells Africa you must suffer so that you can have economic success. Mm-hmm. And since 1944, African countries have been suffering under the International Monetary Fund, still waiting for economic success. Now, the International Monetary Fund is not Africa's friend. It's actually an enemy. It has been an enemy. I grew up in Nigeria under structural adjustment program, austerity measures. The International Monetary Fund does not do anything in the West. It's completely useless in the West. So it was created to ensure to manage Africa's resources for what Africa's resources have been used for for centuries. You take Africans to be slaves to build North America, then you go colonize Africa to harness and steal its resources. Then you come back to Africa under international measures to manage Africa so that its resources will remain available for the development of the West. And we know this is a fact. And what I feel frustrated about sometimes is we should not be doubting. We know it's a pattern. It's a pattern. I went with my son to Italy about 5 years ago just to see Rome, and we went to the museums. All we saw were African art. So we're asking, we're certain the Italians must have had some art. They were just African art. Africa's resources has been managed and packaged for the use of the West. And the International Monetary Fund, set up in Bretton Woods, Berlin Conference in the late 18th century, they were all set up to manage the resources of a part of the world for the development of another part of the world. This is a pattern that has shown itself again and again and again. The International Monetary Fund is a lending mechanism targeting mainly Africa, managing Africa's resources. Now, I don't want to preempt the next question you're going to ask relating to Burkina Faso, but I know why International Monetary Fund is lending the amount of money, 78 billion or billion or whatever is lending to Burkina Faso. I know. Anybody who monitors the trend, I'm a student of patterns of the way Africa is abused and misused, and I'm an advocate too against it. They will know exactly why suddenly the IMF is giving loans to help for resilience for Burkina Faso, to help Burkina Faso. The IMF has never been to any African country and helped any African country to succeed. It has imposed hardship on African countries. How can you come into an African country, which they did to Nigeria when I was a child? Reduce healthcare, reduce this, step down on this, suffer as much as you can so that you can be better later. And none of this has happened. So for me, the International Monetary Fund is a lending mechanism that promotes austerity measures to African countries. It was set up in 1944, the Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire. It does not do anything with the Western countries. It is very busy when it comes to Africa, telling African countries, oh, if you do this, your debt will be less. The United States of America is the signatory, is the top decision maker at 17% of the International Monetary Fund. The United States of America, owns the decision making to 17% with the International Monetary Fund. It makes the major decision. It's a funding mechanism. But the United States of America owns the most in the world. Yeah. The United States of America is the top debtor in the world. China is, I believe, until last year, is the top borrower to the United States. Let the International Monetary Fund go to advise the United States of America how to manage to bring in austerity, how Americans should starve so that the United States of America can pay off its debts. Because with the new budget in the United States, it's coming on to 4 billion trillion US dollars. How much has Burkina Faso paid off? That I don't want to preempt your question, but I believe that we should stop. Africans must come to the realization that what is happening is not by chance, it's intentional. Any system that has international, that has world, that has united, global, is usually used to manage the resources in Africa for the rest. And coming to that conclusion helps us do the advocacy we need to do when we see those systems emerging around the African continent. So that's what I know the International Monetary Fund is. I've experienced it. It's an enemy. I grew up in Nigeria under Structural Adjustment Program. We call this SAP, the Structural Adjustment Program. I don't know anywhere in Africa where IMF have made any difference. It just encourages Africa that suffer, go into austerity, borrow more. So when you borrow, we cannot tell you how to pay back. So you can, and to pay back, suffer. And I'll finish on this note, my dear sister Mahlet. I decided I don't have a credit card as I speak to you. I do not owe anything because I've realized borrowing, owing can be a form of imprisonment. Now, I have borrowed before. I had huge credit card credit card bills. I owed car financing my car when I lived in the West. I owed credit card bills. I was owing, and I looked at myself. I said, how can I wake up every morning and my mission is how I pay this off, pay that off? And I said, no. I had a property, I sold it off, and I paid off all my bills. And as I speak to you, there are still people asking me, oh, you can borrow this, why don't you borrow that? You cannot travel like this way if you don't borrow. You must have a credit card to be able to borrow because it's a law. And I told myself, because I'm over 55, that I took early retirement as I moved over 55. That was the earliest I could take it. This a couple of years ago. I said, I will not owe ever again. I will not live in an illusion. And that is what the International Monetary Fund has done to Africa. It lures Africa. And you have the corrupt African leaders who say, oh, 70 billion US dollars or million US dollars, I could actually 70 million US dollars, I could take half and give some other of my staff some, and they get gleeful and they subject future generation into a life of hell, into paying what they did not sign up for. The IMF is a credit card kind of institution that was developed to focus on Africa. And what is worse is that most African countries, they go to the African countries that they see have prospect.
Yeah.
It's like a parasite. They look at African countries that have prospect and they go there. Like I said, I do not want to preempt your questions, Sister Mahlet, because they help me speak from my heart. But let's look at why they're going to Burkina Faso.
Okay, then let's move with that note to the next question, which is particularly to Burkina Faso. So earlier I read what inspired our discussion today, where the article reads that on June 20, Burkina Faso, IMF has allocated $32.8 million to Burkina Faso, and that is the third round since 2023. And totally, so far from September 2023, they have they have supported. That's also another thing. They use this word support, aid, fund, this as if it's not a loan. Anyways, 131.3 million US dollars. That is since September 2023. That is in 2 years' time. That's what we are looking at. Now, with all this, look, President Captain Ibrahim Traore has criticized repetitively that relying on foreign debt is not good, and he has criticized that. In fact, some of the viral videos were going as if Burkina Faso has rejected loans, but we see that IMF has been allocating this money or lending this money to Burkina Faso. Now, when we see, countries like Burkina Faso, when they start, or other African countries, when they happen to take, control of their resources, whether be it land or in terms of governance or making their economic independence, which is exactly the path of sovereignty, the path of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Why we see all of the sudden IMF knocking door in these countries. Now let's talk about Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso seems doing good, in terms of, we have seen a couple of weeks ago appointing a UNICEF representative. You have come and we have discussed the issues. Now, in less than 2 weeks, we see also an IMF coming, knocking the door of Burkina Faso. Why?
Thank you, Sister Mahlet. We spoke on your channel, your very beautiful, powerful channel, Connect Africa, about 3 weeks or a month ago. And we were speaking on General Langley from African, who is being fired from his role. And he spoke about the gold in Burkina Faso. It's all about Burkina Faso's gold. Burkina Faso, I will reiterate, General Langley sat in Congress and all he could speak about was what was happening to Burkina Faso's gold. When you hear somebody speaking in the United States, speaking in that term, it means the radar has been for a long time on Burkina Faso's gold. Mm-hmm. Burkina Faso has all that other major initiative is taking on, is turning into one of the top world exporter of pineapple. The country is doing well. And its gold has been a source of exploitation. There have been many external factors that have benefited, stolen Burkina Faso's gold for years. Now, Burkina Faso has leveraged its gold resources to pay off its debts it doesn't owe. It has leveraged its gold for national to build the country. It's able to build the schools it's building. That's why, UNICEF jumps in. It's now been able to stop exploitation and exportation of its gold. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, as I mentioned, the United States brought in General Langley to make sure, Ibrahim Traore is demonized by, it used the usual corruption term. That's what you use to kill African leaders. You kill them using corruption, demonize them, give them a bad name, then, find another African who is greedy to kill them. That's the pattern. These days it has changed. As I mentioned, we have a social media space in today's world where we can speak out and fight and hold our leaders up. So here's the pattern here. There are many resources. The International Monetary Fund, it's funded majorly by the United States of America. America has the top veto power. It's the top decision-making power at 17%. Mm-hmm. Now, General Langley's narrative of corrupt Burkina Faso, Captain Traore, who basically whose salary is $1,000 a month, did not fly. He did not do his research, so it did not stick. The notion of nobody can look at Ibrahim Traore and say, that does not stick. Now, what other tool? The International Monetary Fund has come in. And the International Monetary Fund, this is what it's going to do. It's going to, if Ibrahim Traore takes it, or they might force it to take it. They have different mechanisms. Once it takes Burkina Faso takes it, accepts it under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traore, they will now, the support aid will come. There will be different aid, different perks attached to it. And attached to that will be advisory role. Then that's the initial stage to lure African countries to accept in the International Monetary Fund loan and different perks aid. Then once that go in, they start advising. Then they start demanding. And the advisory role comes into law, African countries, then they start demanding, reduce the schools you're building. You've built 847 schools. That is too much. Considering your debt, what we've borrowed you, that is too much schools. You have to reduce it to 500. That would be the advisory role so that you pay off your debt. It doesn't matter that many children will not have access to free education, which Captain Ibrahim Traore has put forward. Your healthcare, you cannot afford free healthcare. That is not something you should be going for when you owe this amount of money. That is taken away, taken out of the table. Then Burkina Faso starts owing. Then 20 years, 15 years down the line, Burkina Faso is no more as we see it now. It will go back to what Burkina Faso was about 10 years ago. Burkina Faso was celebrated, quote unquote, I use this sarcastically, as one of the poorest countries in the world. You know, one of the poorest countries in the world. And you know why I am very watchful? Because I've worked in the international humanitarian system for close to 30 years, and I watch it as the dangerous phenomenon for Africa. Because Africa has always operated in the international humanitarian system. International humanitarianism, international systems, international global affairs was the process through which Africans were taken as slaves out of Africa to work to build the West. It was global and international through ships. Then we look at why do we expect the new internationals to be different? So this is what's going to happen to Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is under immense pressure because it is defying the norm. It is defying the norm. Captain Ibrahim Traore has done something that is shaking some systems. And so that's what's going to happen. The International Monetary Fund is an enemy. It's a top enemy of Africa's growth. And no country in Africa should accept it. Every African must act against it. And you know, over 200 billion, I might check it again, about 200 billion come to Africa from the diaspora in remittances around the world, from Africans around the world. It could be 20 billion. It's 20 billion. And I celebrate that. It means families are living, there's some kind of resource that is coming back. But what Africans in diaspora must start doing is to start challenging their countries against some policies and practices that hold their ancestors down, their siblings down, that impoverish, that is making lives unbearable in Africa so that the West can benefit. And one of those is the policy of organizations like International Monetary Fund. I hear stories of, Nigerians are doing so well in the United States of America. They are medical doctors. I don't care. Good for them. When they are able to influence policy to make my fathers, my brothers, my relatives, my fellow Nigerians in Nigeria live better, then I can celebrate them. I don't really care much that, a lot of Nigerians are medical doctors in the United States. When you can build a hospital in Nigeria to take care of the sick, then I can celebrate you as a Nigerian. we're successful. Because what we find right now is that we are sitting down, we're looking at this establishment, these institutions that are obviously have proven themselves as really anti-African countries. We see them, we just look at them. How do I get how do I get out of the country? Let me go do something for myself. And we know these institutions exist to intentionally, deliberately undermine the growth and well-being and the strive of African countries. Let the International Monetary Fund go to the United States of America and go and advise the United States of America on how it should address its debts. It's the highest debt in the world. Let it go there. There are other countries that owe. Why Africa? The woman who is heading it right now is from Bulgaria. What is the IMF doing in Bulgaria? Surely they must be running through some rough stuff. Why Burkina Faso at this time? Burkina Faso has paid off its debts and is providing free healthcare. It's built free homes for its people. It's one of the top exporters of pineapple. It has leveraged its gold to build the country. Why now? And that is the question we must ask. What is the International Monetary Fund going to do in Burkina Faso? Why now?
Because the country is doing well, and that's not allowed for the African country. Because that seems the case every time the countries reclaim their, resources and, kind of take matters in their own hands to determine their destinies, then they are at the door, blaming you, telling you this all character assassination, this and that. In fact, yesterday here at Connect Africa, we have talked over the phone with you as well regarding now the ICC, as one has called it beautifully, the International Colonial Court is probing to drag, investigation on Burkina Faso and Mali in the name of some separatist groups, meaning terrorist groups, are accusing these governments for spreading videos that they kill terrorists and or they are killing the people, this and that. Anyway, but we hear this, the reverse is happening, because Mali already already in June alone, the Prime Minister Abdoulaye Diop of Mali has talked about bringing Ukraine to the United Nations Security Council and to ICC, because Ukraine is supporting and sponsoring terrorist groups in the Sahel region. Now we hear in less than 2 weeks again, this is kind of reversed, and then ICC is telling us they are probing to investigate these governments. And with that being said, Sister Choice, I have a question for you. Why do we see every time when these governments are African governments like Burkina Faso and others, and we have seen also, you have been a witness what Ethiopia has gone through from 2020 to 2022 in that war in the northern part. Why all these things, the character assassinations, the demonization, and then dragging you in the name of genocide to ICC? Why?
It is a very painful space. But like I mentioned always to you, Sister Mahlet, when there's a battle, there's a battle. And that battle will be fought. I find us Africans in a powerful space. And I say that because everything is self-revealing. It's self-revealing. It's you know, they used to tease Africans that if you want to hide something from Africans, put it in a book that Africans don't read. But I love these days, say, be it what it may be, Africans are very many in social media now.
Yeah.
If they say we don't read, we read. I didn't grow up with social media. We read. But for those who say we don't read, we have social media. The battle will be fought. Now, why? Why is because it's a matter of control. You know, when India got its independence from the UK, a very saucy, sarcastic journalist asked Mahatma Gandhi, now India has its independence, will it live like the UK? Mahatma Gandhi said, I'm just paraphrasing, that for India to live like what the UK has lived, India will need to go outside the world to to exploit people, to get the resources the UK has exploited to live the way it's living. The basis of the West existence has come from is based on exploitation, and exploitation means you take that which is not yours for you at the expense of the well-being of those you've stolen from. So, and it comes with narrative. I mean, every form of exploitation, like you mentioned, you know, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is just actually very funny if you look at it. Headed by a woman from Gambia some years ago, they usually bring in Black African female faces to head these things when they are feeling challenged. The United States has called for it to be used, but the United States is not a signatory to it. The International Criminal Court has never been used, as far as I know, in the West. And Ukraine remains a very clear indication of how the international aid is flawed and is driven by racism, by the Blacks and the West, you know? And the International Criminal Court is like the International Monetary Fund. You know, it is to whip, punish, demonize African leaders. Having said that, I spoke from a place of hope. I am passionately hopeful at this time. We will speak up. If we don't speak, nothing will happen. Because I am not the head of state of Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, Niger. These are Ethiopia. These are Rwanda. I can call 5. These are 5 countries who have been blessed with amazing leadership. Rwanda, Niger, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Mali, Gabon is stepping up. And Egypt is controversial, but new things are happening there. There's controversy around the current leadership of Egypt, but something is happening there. So I speak from a place of hope, but I speak with an understanding that the instruments, as I mentioned in the beginning, my sister Mahlet, that anything international, world, united, global, is a backing dog that has no teeth. The only place they run around trying to threaten and bully any country is usually in Africa. And they are usually told, stop, go do our job by the Western countries that fund them. So it's a pattern. I've worked in the system close to 30 years. The United States of America will use the ICC to go after Ethiopia if it wants Ethiopia to accept the grains from Ukraine. And Ethiopia says, no, we don't need the grain. We're producing our own wheat. We're in fact exporting wheat. Oh, you're killing your people. You're killing your people. You're demonic. You're killing. It starts that the demonic language. The demonic language starts, and this is a pattern, like I say. Look at what they said about, look at how they killed Muammar Gaddafi. I mean, Libya was a place, Libya, the head of state for Libya was paying, funding the African Union. It was pushing, Libya was a haven for Libyans. Free education, free housing. You get married, you're giving money for free housing. It welcomed Africans. It was a Pan-African space. Then suddenly, oh, Muammar Gaddafi is a terrible person. Oh, then he was killed with the help of another black man, Barack Obama, with Hillary Clinton. Then Libya today has become a space of hell for Africans. It has been selling Africans as slaves. So why did they do that to Libya? Is this answer to why they are moving towards Burkina Faso. Africa has been pushed into a place as raw materials for the West in terms of labor, slavery, in terms of access to its resources, colonialism, in terms of narrative to ensure continued access to its resources, demonization of its leaders. The problem with the people I've just counted, the head of state for Burkina Faso, Mali, Chad, Niger, they are not the normal form of which leaders are appointed in African countries, which usually comes through the approval of some Westerners. I come from a country where in the last 9 years, they spend more times in the UK than in 2015 to 2016. I'm from a country where the president from Africa spent most times in the UK. Every decision in terms of budget allocation got suspended because he need to UK. So I come from a country where most of my presidents go for approval abroad, to shake hands abroad. These 5 countries I've mentioned have not done that. They focus on regional collaboration and building and nation building, and it's making some people uncomfortable. So the language comes, go to the International Criminal Court. Why has the International Criminal Court not been used anywhere else? Why? So I think we can conclude, and I say this with confirmation factually, that anything that has international, world, united, global, is used as a tool to manage African countries to the detriment of the well-being of the continent and its peoples. And ICC is International Criminal Court. It's International Criminal Court. Now, what can we do about it? We can continue to speak. Those of us who are not directly occupying any political role in African countries, we continue to raise awareness about what these things mean. You know, my sister Mahlet, I feel very passionate and very inspired by the United States citizens. I watch a lot, I do YouTube, and I'm so impressed and inspired by the passion with which Americans defend and speak up about the well-being of the United States. They speak up about what is good for the United States, whether we like it or not, but they are passionate about standing for their country and building their country. That passion inspires me every day. And that is what we need for African countries. And most times I do not comment much on my social media space about what's happening in the United States. There's war happening here, bombing there. I don't comment because my passion is to contribute to the well-being of my region. That's Africa. I'm a Pan-Africanist. And, and no other region determines how I speak or where I speak to. So I'm not distracted. So, but I watch the debate. I watch how passionate they are. The social media space is infused with Americans debating, should my country go to this war? Should they be bombing this place? Should they be doing this? Should they be doing that? And I watch. I don't speak on it, but I know what's happening because they are focused on their country. They are focused on the well-being of their country. They are not distracted. And I choose that too. Nobody's going to distract me from what's happening in Africa. I watch Africa. And some people have said, oh, Africa is over 50 states. I said, no, I did not sit in the Berlin conference when Africa was chopped up. So when I say Africa, I see a whole. Because we have to understand that India has a strength because of its number. China is the same. They did not chop them up. China is still fighting against, Taiwan that was chopped off. So if I did not sit at the Berlin conference or another African country sat there to chop Africa off, I treat Africa as a whole because it's a powerful whole when we look at it like that. So the ICC is a joke. The ICC is a joke because it's going to hover around Africa. Oh, Africa, you hover around Africa. And Africa is getting more powerful. African leaders are getting more powerful. They are standing strong. ICC cannot jump around. And they have to understand when they jump around that Captain Abraham Torre worked as a peacekeeper with the United Nations. He understands the system. And when you understand the system, it's actually a joke. The International Criminal Court is just sad because we've had African women who've led it. You would have thought you would bring it down. Get every country to become a signatory to it and not have it controlled by a country that has refused to sign onto it. And that is the tragedy we face. It's an instrument against African leaders to put them in line, to keep them as puppets. And we will watch, we will do what we can, and we will continue to fight. It doesn't mean we don't live a life of joy. We're Africans, we have so much joy around us, but we will take care of our continent, because that's what the United States of America is doing. That's what many countries around the world do. Not all Africans just sit down and say, let me just get my daily bread. No, there are some of us who put things at risk just to make sure the message go out there. So the International Criminal Court is a joke. Yeah.
Thank you, Sister Joyce. I have one last question. Can countries, like, for example, Burkina Faso, which we expected they will say, reject IMF's proposal of loan, or there is no way to escape this and they just have to play in the name of diplomacy and say, okay, was there an option? But also, I will say that, because this is the last question, I will still give the benefit of the doubt to Burkina Faso, because yesterday I was reading an article which says, Burkina Faso has this, and all of the Sahel states have this ambition, of having Pan-Africanism, having those institutions, they have established their confederational bank, their security system, this and that, and they want to impact also beyond the Sahel states. But right now, because of the terrorism that is going on in the Sahel states, much of their fund is directed to security, and they're really begging for the Western countries to stop sponsoring this terrorism in that region. So there's definitely, if much of their budget, even when they have increased the share of their natural resources, still, if it is going to security, then there is a need definitely of money, and maybe there's no other option than taking that money. But if it was possible, is it possible for the African countries to say, no, we don't need your loan? Is it even an option?
I think it's an option. It's an option. And why it's an option is because they've taken the other option for over 50 years. It did not work. I think we have to understand that African countries have progressively gotten worse under some of these institutions we've mentioned. And when something is not working, it is not working. You can say it has not worked for about 60 years. Why should I take it? Since 1944. Yes, because it has not worked. It's a very clear reason. And Burkina Faso, for example, has been able to trade on its own gold. It has done it since 2023. I mean, let's look at Niger with uranium. It took over its resources, which it used to sell at 87 euros to our Grand France, and decided to manage it itself. And from making 3 billion a year, it made over 300 billion a year. There's evidence existing at this moment that when African countries take that decision to use its resources, which is bold, which is stepping away from the norm, it has paid off. So why would, now we're talking about security issues. How much are they giving Burkina Faso for security? 78, maybe much, million. Ukraine has received close to 300 billion on its issues. If they can say no, the countries that don't say no are those who are very corrupt. We know, because when the money comes, you are able to access it for personal gains. So there are people who say, oh, the money is here, just shave off a couple of billions, maybe 10 billion, and share with your team. Then the others, what happens? One NGO gets this, some development people get that. By the time it's split up, the problem continues every 3 years. The United States Agency for International Development, recently, we know with the onset of Trump's administration, froze and reduced its funding. And I've been asking how many people have died. And I do it because foreign aid does not always get to its destination. It is usually, it facilitates foreign policy and foreign position. It's a foreign policy tool. It is not necessarily funds that directly come to countries. Some do trickle down, but it's a foreign policy position and tool. So they call some aid security measures, to fight terrorism. Why have terrorism grown across Africa? For how long? Why? Who is feeding it? And I asked this question, look at terrorism in Nigeria. They mentioned Boko Haram. And I just sit down. When I came to Nigeria to head the UN Humanitarian Office in Abuja, nobody spoke so much about the terrorism then. This was 2012. I started seeing it in the news. Oh, 3 people died, 2 died, 1 died. And I had a small team and appointed 2 of my teammates to start monitoring the fatalities every day. It became a huge deal because the international community now started feeding it. Funds started arriving to certain people, and suddenly it became a huge deal. Why do we have terrorism across the Sahel? Is the question. Who is feeding it? What is feeding it? And why does it have so much attention? Why can it not be? Why can't, why can't we stop it? We can.
The other thing is, let me just interject in this. There's a good point that one of our viewers here in the chat section wrote. So he comments, child of God by the name. 32 million is not a lot of money. They could ask for a loan from people in the diaspora. That's exactly what hit me when I read that article for that. This is not a lot of money. They can turn to the people, their people in the diaspora, even all these Pan-Africans who are rooting for Captain Ibrahim Traore will put money and send it. But there must be something bigger than that that's forcing them to take this loan. Do you want to comment on this?
The person who spoke just made a very powerful point. Mm-hmm. It's about organizing. If I missed the answer, forgive me, you just remind me. But I just got caught up with what that person who asked the question said. How far are we willing to go to make a difference? So what if we started a fund?
Yeah.
It's not just sending money. Yes, send money to members of your family to help them. A fund for Ibrahim Traore, a fund for Niger, Chad, or a fund for the Sahel. Just say, I just put some money towards a fund to monitor the Sahel. Who are the terrorists? Why are they able to thrive in the Sahel? They can't thrive anywhere else. Why, where, and how are they coming in? And what is feeding them? Many Nigerians don't leave Nigeria because they are scared of banditry and farmers and herdsmen, violence. It's literally undermining food security. That's true. We have challenges, but why? We had a former head of state. His name is Abacha. He's dead now, and he said, once there's any form of terrorism, fatal insecurity that lasts more than 24 hours, somebody is fueling it, who knows, and it's in the system. He said that under his rule, nothing of this nature happened. Why is it growing now? Is the question. And I just feel inspired by that notion by one of our family members who is viewing this with us, saying that why can't we mobilize the diaspora more to use them to make a difference in a more systemic, in a regional manner. And as we said, this Mahlet, we have an African Union. We have ECOWAS. We have these systems. What is happening with them? What is happening with them? We have the African Union. We have ECOWAS for around the Sahel that should be able to be mobilized to provide security. The African Union. Why are we folding our hands and just watching? There are many analysts in the system, but it's almost like we've given up. How can we have people live in a territory where death is literally next door in the name of terrorists? So in a way, it's for me, I believe that, and I'm committed to this, we just need the boldness to do more. And it's not just for an individual like Ibrahim Traore, because I think Captain Ibrahim Traore and the leaders of Niger, Chad, I think we have our eyes on them. It will be very difficult for one African who is hoping to sneak in and do anything. His generation and future generation will carry the load of it, because the light will be on them. It's not 30 years ago or 40 years ago when things like that happened. But I think what is happening is the way international systems are going to be deployed against some of these people, because we have coups. People, coups is usually a bad thing. When they had coups, I said, good thing. This is a movement. It's a change. Why have a government that holds people down in misery for 40 years? Because they run every 4 years, then their children come up. No, if a man sees his people in peril, in deep, deep misery, you step up, and we have a good government that can provide food, help people live, provide health care. I will cheer it on any day. But we will not, what I believe we will do in this generation is the fact that when we continue to raise awareness, to make statements, and defy the notion of the West controlling Africa to be a provider of raw materials to the West, including slaves, colonial, artifacts, those days are gone. So if they are trying to do it because they are pining, salivating over the gold, and miserable that they cannot access the gold and uranium as they used to in countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, we will keep our eyes. There are people like me and you who are students of the pattern, who are very vigilant of what's happening, and that is what we do. Why they rule, why they do their work as leaders, we will continue to keep our eyes on the ball and make sure Africa will no longer be used as a source of slaves. That is the goal, because slavery officially ended, but Africa is still enslaved by the theft of its resources, by the use of international systems against it, intentionally and boldly against it, by decisions that were made that kept Africa out of the table, that are still being implemented boldly. Mm-hmm. Then when Africans speak up, they now employ, recruit an African woman. These days they're usually women in high position, and then I'll start saying the things that are against their own people.
Yeah, so let me come in. And no, thank you, Sister Choice. Really, we are benefiting from all your insights and from your personal experience. Now, our people are really, I see that here in the chat section, they're very disappointed why Burkina Faso has accepted this. This is, again, please do not be disappointed or do not lose your hope. You did not say that you lose your hope, but the thing is that the government is much more smarter than this place. Day after day, on a daily basis, they have been, surprising us, taking Africa, or at least one African country, to the next level. All the things that we thought cannot be done in Africa, they have done it. So, and let's be realistic that Burkina Faso, countries cannot be isolated from the rest of the world, right? I don't know. There are African countries, just so you know, 3 African countries. I don't know if it's maybe in the world, but in Africa, 3. That's Eritrea, Botswana, and Libya, who have never accepted a loan from IMF and World Bank. They have rejected it. These are 3 countries, okay? But the thing is that they cannot remain isolated. And for real, when you face such, problem of security, there might be a shortage of fund, or I don't know. But Burkina Faso, now to add on,
if I may come in, my sister Mahlet, taking a loan from the IMF does not make you engage in equal partnership. We're not calling for Burkina Faso to be isolated. Burkina Faso has signed a very strong agreement with Russia. Burkina Faso gets along with Russia, with China. There are many avenues through which Burkina Faso is engaged in very healthy partnership, including in the region. Captain Abraham Traore is treated like a joy in many countries in the world. So taking a loan that would involve your economic progress and path being dictated by another system that does not operate in the West, taking that loan, it's not it's a form of submissiveness to a system that might not be good for you. It doesn't mean that taking a loan means you're going against being isolated. It has never been so. The International Monetary Fund, the loans have not worked for Africa. Nobody's talking about the United States loan. Nobody's talking about many countries' loan, but each time it's about loan forgiveness, debt forgiveness in Africa. That Africa must pay its debts. African countries must pay their debts before they can develop or progress. It has been the story for over 30 years. Debt. African is owing. So I hear you and I agree with you. Africa is not calling for isolation. Burkina Faso is not calling for isolation. We must engage with countries, around the world in economic partnership, mutually beneficial economic partnership.
Yeah.
That's what the United States is doing with China. China is the top borrower to the United States. United States is the top debtor in the world, but it engages in very mutually beneficial relationship. Is doing it with China, although they complain. Russia is there. There are many countries coming on board. So why can't Burkina Faso have one of those? Why can't Burkina Faso reach out to Russia, which Russia has actually stepped forward to help Burkina Faso regarding the security challenges? So why are they luring Burkina Faso with 78 million? What are the conditions is the question we want to ask. What will it cost Burkina Faso? Because no country should be isolated. Every country in the world should have a mutually economically beneficial engagement with each other. But to go and take a debt, look at Niger. Niger was able to harness about 300 billion from its uranium. Why can't it borrow, lend at least some amount of millions to Burkina Faso for security? Why can't they pool their resources together for security? Why must it come from an international system that has never served any country in Africa? Since the establishment of these international systems, Africa has gone down. So why continue to engage in a process that has been totally negative to the growth of a continent? That's for me, that's where I'm coming from. I'm not calling for isolation. I'm calling for disengagement from negative, exploitative systems. And they start with international.
Yeah, because usually they come with their luggage, with conditions.
Yes.
It starts, for example, I will give you an example. Ethiopia recently, or I don't know, a few months back, got a loan in billions, 2 billion or whatever, how much billion it is. So it is given by phase. And the first thing that was done was, to devaluate the currency to make it equal with so-called black market. And it just continues now. That devaluation is continuing. So, and there are more baggage. Privatization also. That's another baggage they bring on you. Privatize your government, state-owned companies.
Yes.
That's what they are going to ask you. So we don't know what went in that office between the Burkina Faso government and IMF. We just hope that this government is a Pan-African government that will not allow that exploits the country. I don't know what to say. And SS means there was a good comment here. Let me just go back to it. The fact is that, the colonizers and IMF do not respect the will of the Sahel and its leaders and leave them alone unless they come to them. They have not learned. Anyway, David Nathan said, BRICS is starving the IMF or the US dollar economy. So do not feed the beast. So basically he's asking, why are you feeding the beast? Sister Choice, you have raised, there's there is a resource even within the region from Niger, Mali, and then now there is also BRICS. They are not officially a member or not associate, but they have a strong, Burkina Faso has a strong relationship with the founders like Russia and China. So why not resourcing it from that? Unfortunately, there is a lot of unanswered questions when we leave this platform, but still we try to bring the information as much as what we have. Look, now Sister Choice talked about previously, if coming from also from our viewer, why not asking that money from the diaspora, because it's very little. Burkina Faso is not stranger for how do you say, raising fund from the public and from its diaspora.
Yes.
Is no stranger. They have done it, and Ibrahim Traore is still doing it under his leadership.
Yes.
I'm gonna read this article that was written, that was released by the Burkina Faso government, and then later on other streams also have copy pasted it. It was released at the end of 2024, at the end of the year. And look, as of December 30, 2024, approximately 175 billion CFA francs, that is the currency of ECOWAS, or this previously French colonized countries, that is equal to 313.9 millions dollars have been collected from the Patriotic Fund, an instrument intended to finance the fight against terrorism. Now, this amount represents a mobilization rate of more than 116% compared to the revised target of 150 billion CFA franc, indicated the Ministry of Economy and Finance of Burkina Faso. So what I'm trying to say here is that they know about of this raising fund from the public, and if they turn to whether it is from the diaspora or the global African people, they know they get that money. But I don't know what pressuring point it has reached for them to accept this allocation. Right, Sister Choice?
I don't have much details about that. Yeah. About that. The gentleman or
the prosperous one, yeah, there's a lot. Okay, please go on, Sister Choice.
It did a good job. It laid out. I'm going to read all the comments, and I will learn from many of them, if not most of them, and all of them. What I do believe, in terms of, we've reached a pressure point, and we live in a world today. We've reached it, and I think we reached it when we saw our fellow Africans dying in the Mediterranean to get out. We reached it when I read a report as a UN staff where Africans said they'll rather die in the Mediterranean than stay back in Africa. We reached it. We reached it when an African was beaten to death in Italy. We've reached the pressure point, and we've reached it as well with what Africans are experiencing in the diaspora. Because in as much as we have Africans that send money home, back home to Africa, we don't understand that sometimes it's not the healthiest, mentally healthy lifestyle they want. I've lived mostly in Africa in my life, and with my son, I've raised my son, mostly in Africa, and I consider that a privilege because I've traveled, lived outside Africa as well. We've reached the pressure point, and that pressure point is this. Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He's German. Originally, his mother is German, but Germany is doing well. But is in the United States doing well. The fact of the matter is that we have other regions that have been able to come into the West and do well. Africans, I come to Canada, I go in and out. I travel quite a bit. Africans are not doing that well outside. And I think because we have not yet hitting on the pressure point you mentioned. And that pressure point means that unless Africa as a region thrives, Africans will not thrive abroad. Because the pride of us as Africans is how well Africa is doing. Once people see us and think that you are in the West because your continent is awful and horrible, you are so poor, you cannot make your own people, you cannot do anything in your continent, that's why you're here. Unless that notion is defeated, we will all deal with the consequences. So the Africans who are outside Africa should thrive. And that thriving is connected to ensuring that Africa as a region thrives. We cannot leave the continent in that notion of struggling, of poverty. There are some words I do not use anymore when it comes to Africa. We have to fight and defeat the push to put Africa as the poor cousins of the world. Africa cannot eat off the leftovers, what is thrown on the dining table, on the floor, unless. So we've reached that that pressure point, and that pressure point is so diffused that we have not been able to activate any collective action with consistency to make a difference. I lived most of my life, as I mentioned, in Africa, mainly Abuja. I love Abuja, but I understand some of the challenges. I understand the challenges that are bound there. I live in Toronto as well sometimes, and I'm not certain I want to make Toronto my permanent home because it doesn't align with what I know are the possibilities of the human experience. It's not just about a mall, skyscrapers, that's not what makes that. I've raised my son the same way, So yeah, so we've reached a pressure point, my sister, and it's just that the collective impact is where we're struggling, because the impact, what we're going through, is diffused in a way. But I still speak from a place of hope. Burkina Faso 5 years ago was treated as the poorest country in the world, one of the poorest countries in the world. Now today is known around the world because of a brilliant man, Captain Ibrahim Traore. Now, if he took the IMF loan, if he has signed it, we'll watch. If he was pressured into signing it, I'm convinced without doubt that he would address it. He's a very brilliant man. I am convinced he will undermine whatever intention is brought forward. He's going to protect his country's resources to build Burkinabes, to build his people. That man has demonstrated his capacity, and I believe if anybody is sneaking in to see how to access his gold for his people, he's going to make sure that gold will go towards the citizens of Burkina Faso. I believe that. And there lies the hope I carry. When I look at the new leadership we have in Africa, the dynamic, bold leadership we have in Africa that are emerging, that's the hope. I carry that hope. As a woman who's walked around the continent for over 30 years, I see these elements as just joyful. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
A beautiful place to leave it at. Hopefully, the Burkinabe people and the Burkina Faso's government will listen to us and will watch it at least and try in a way to address it, so that we here Pan-Africans do not ask his Pan-Africans or hesitate at any rate. So hopefully they will address it, as you said. But beautiful, really beautiful message to the people and to the government of Burkina Faso. Thank you very much, all of you who have been here, who supported us, who engaged with us. And yeah, thank you so much. It's you are the reason for us to be here. Without you, we are just nothing. So we will continue what we do. We all have, it's not an easy to come here every day and to talk about it, whatever it is. But you are the reason, with no exaggeration, for us to do this. And thank you very much, Sister Choice. So as usual. Again, we will see you again. We have a lineup of topics for you. We have talked about it. Just to give you a quick shout out, S.A. Smith, devastating for you. Ciendes, the prosperous one, David Nathan, all of you. I don't know if I am missing anyone, Emmanuel, all of you, thank you so much. If you have any last word, I think you said you will leave it at that, but I will give you the floor. It's a goodbye from us.
Thank you. Thank you is what I say. It gives me so much. It's just a joy to me to understand and know when I'm in your space, the number of people who are rooting for the continent. It just gives me so much joy. And I do some public speaking with young Africans as well, wherever I am. I've done it in Nigeria, I do it here. It's just to inspire. We just need to pass the baton. We pass the baton. And I've committed that I'm planting a tree of hope and growth in Africa. I may not eat the fruit, but that is my commitment, is to plant a tree. I just want to know that as when I leave this earth, that I've invested my time, my knowledge, my energy, and my resources, financial and me, physical, to ensuring that I've invested in a way that the younger generation will have something to work with as they move forward. That is my goal. That is what I strive for. And I'm grateful when I run into someone like Sister Mahlet, because it just tells me that yes, there are many of us who carry this gift of wanting to serve this continent. And I'm grateful to you for giving me the space and opportunity, my Sister Mahlet, to share, to be inspired by you, to continue to serve in a way I feel called to. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Likewise, thank you very much, Sister Choice. And I do love you. You're my sister. And we talk about so much. We rant about it. We don't even choose time to talk about it. So, yeah, we leave it at that. And God bless you. I know you are doing great. Thank you all. Bye-bye. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.